I want to tell you a story about my son. So, Augustus is fixing to be 11 years old, and he's amazing. He is my miracle baby. When he was about 8 weeks old, he started throwing up a lot, and one day he was throwing up so much, I had to go change his onesie. And after that, we went on through our normal day, and it was time for us to go see our in laws. So we go see our in laws, and my father in law is holding Augustus, and he says, Sissy, I think this baby's running a fever. This baby's hot. And I said, oh my goodness, okay. Well, sure enough, he was very hot. He seemed like he had a fever. So at that point, I decided, well, we need to take him to the emergency room because I want to get him checked out, with him being as little as he was. So we get to the emergency room, and he is running 104 fever. He was immediately sent back to triage, and the doctors were trying to figure out what was going on with my son. At that point, they had told me that his lungs were filled and that he was being admitted. I still wasn't quite sure what all was going on, but I was definitely eager to find out and very panicked. So we get upstairs and we're admitted. Dr. Nelson comes in and she says, your son has aspirated into his lungs. Apparently, the formula that he had been drinking was going into his lungs rather than into his stomach. I didn't know why. All I knew was he just kept spitting up after I would feed him. At that point, Dr. Nelson said, there's not a whole lot that I can do here. We're going to refer you to Children's Hospital. I immediately was thrown off guard, and I said, okay. She said, you're going to be airlifted and you're going to have to ride in a helicopter. I had never ever rode in a helicopter before, and I was nervous. My anxiety was already high, and now it seemed to have gotten higher. And I told myself, okay, Miranda, you're just going to have to swallow this fear and this anxiety, and we've got to get this baby boy taken care of. We got in that helicopter, and it was as if the ride no longer mattered. I got in there, I was hanging on to my baby boy as we took off. Within minutes, we were there, and all I could think about was him. And thoughts just kept racing through my head. I was thinking, what did I do wrong? Did I do this to my son? Am I the reason why he aspirated into his lungs? I could not figure it out. And of course, I try to blame myself first. So we get to Children's, and the team goes straight in to assisting with helping my son. Next thing I know, he's hooked up to all these machines. They're telling me that his lungs are filled with fluid that they're trying to drain out of him. And I mean, when you see this fluid that's draining out of him, it looks like just clumps of white and yellow and green bacterial infection. At that point, they had told me that he had developed not only this aspiration, but while we were there, they determined that he also had pneumonia. And anything I've ever heard about pneumonia has been completely negative, not anything good. I mean, I've heard several things about people dying from pneumonia. So I was very, very scared. At that point, they had told us that we were being admitted into the PICU, and we ended up staying there for the next 3 months. I was not prepared for that at all, as I still had 2 other children at home, my girls, and I ended up having to stay there every day wondering, is my son going to wake up? is he going to start breathing on his own? Because at that point he was on a ventilator and hooked up to all these different machines. So I want to show you a photo of my son, what he looked like when he was first born. So this is Augustus, and he was 6 pounds and 6 ounces. So once he got hooked up to all these machines, after a week of being there, my son gained 8 pounds of fluid. So this is what he looks like after a week. That's me with him, and he gained 8 pounds of fluid. Now, this is not something that you're going to see me cry about. I feel like I've already shed the majority of my tears over this. And if anything, I've really learned a lot through all of this. Every day I would spend praying to God. It brought me closer to God and made me realize that, this is out of my hands. Only God can perform this miracle in my child and my baby wake up. So Augustus ended up being on the vent for about 2 weeks, and his lungs just progressively got worse. He developed bronchiolitis. Next thing I know, they said, we're moving you to the oscillator. That's scary because apparently we had reached the highest PEEP we could reach on the ventilator and moved to the oscillator. After being on the oscillator for about 2 months, they pulled him off of the oscillator, and they said that his oxygen levels started to regulate, which sent us back to the PEEP, to the vent with the PEEPs. So we were finally headed back in the right direction. And eventually he was breathing on his own. He opened his eyes, and I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. And I was like, oh, this is my baby. I finally get to hold my baby. Like, I hadn't been able to hold my baby in 2.5 months, guys. And I'm just over the moon. So, anyways, I finally got to hold him, and it was just such an overwhelming feeling. So now I learned a huge lesson. I learned a lesson that no matter what, Jesus is going to be there. And I have to tell my story. I have to tell my story to all of these women who might be dealing with silent aspiration with their newborns and not seeing the signs. I didn't know what those signs were. I didn't know that you could aspirate into your lungs at that time with formula. I didn't know that it also came with running 104 fever, and that all of this would develop so quickly. I had no idea. But I know now, so now I am letting others know. So, with that said, I do want to show you one more photo. And this is him today. He is baking brownies, and he loves life. He loves Legos and watching movies with mom. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed my story. Have a great day.